All right, guys, we are going to be talking about evidence of evolution. So let's just jump straight into it. Now, genetic inheritance was not known in Darwin's time. However, Darwin believed that all organisms share a common ancestor. So, in his travels and studies, he collected strong evidence to support his theories. Today, the concept of evolution ties together all fields of biology with embryology, paleontology, morphology, biogeography, and biochemistry. So let's start with embryology first. Embryology is the study of embryos and their development. Darwin noticed that the embryos of different species may look very similar, although the adult species look very different. So, examples are fish, birds, reptiles, and mammals all have gill slits as embryos, but obviously, once they become adults, they look very, very different. So, the similar features of embryos in very different organisms suggest evolution from a distant common ancestor. So, next, let's get into paleontology. Paleontology is the study of fossils or extinct organisms. Scientists were studying fossils long before Darwin knew that organisms changed over time. Darwin collected many fossils during his travels, and these fossils provided evidence for what he and other scientists knew, which is that species change over time, they give rise to new species, and share a common ancestor, which is descent with modification. Now, fossil evidence supports the idea that whales descended from hoofed animals. So, Pakicetus had a whale shaped skull and teeth adapted for hunting fish. Ambulocetus lived on both land and water. And a Dourodon had tiny hind legs that were useless on land, similar to modern whales. Now, the ages of fossils and extinct organisms are determined through relative dating, which can estimate a fossil's age, and absolute dating. So, this is when we calculate a fossil's precise age. Now, we are into biogeography. So, during Darwin's travels, he noticed that plants and animals on the islands look similar to species on the mainland, but not exactly the same. Biogeography is the study of the distribution of organisms around the world. Darwin hypothesized that organisms from the mainland had migrated to the islands. So, different islands had different food sources, climates, and predators. The different environmental conditions favored different traits. Finally, let's get into morphology. So, morphology is a branch of biology that deals with the form of living organisms and with relationships between their structures. So, sometimes it is also referred to as comparative anatomy. Some of Darwin's best evidence came from comparing the body parts of different species. So, he found that some organisms have body parts that are similar in structure but might be used differently. So, an example of this is found in the forelimbs of a bat and dolphin. They are similar in structure but are used differently from one another. The bat uses its forelimbs to fly, while a dolphin will use its forelimbs to swim. There are three different types of structures that provide evidence of evolution. We have homologous structures, analogous structures, and we have vestigial structures. Now, homologous structures, this is when the structure that are very similar in related organisms because they were inherited from a common ancestor. So these structures may or may not have the same function in the descendants. Next, we have our analogous structures. So these structures are similar in unrelated organisms. So the structures are similar because they evolved to do the same job, not because they were inherited from a common ancestor. So the wings of bats and birds look similar on the outside, and they also have the same function. However, wings have evolved independently into two groups of animals. Now, this is apparent when you compare the pattern of bones inside the wings. Next, we have vestigial structures. This is when we have small leftover organs or structures that had a function in an early ancestor. So, one example of this is found in snakes. Snakes actually have tiny hind leg bones buried in muscles towards the end of their tail. So, other examples is the appendix in humans. So, the appendix is an organ that helps to digest certain plant material eaten by human ancestors. So, the human appendix has lost the ability to digest this material and actually has no known function today. Finally, we have biochemistry. So, scientists will also observe similarities among organisms at the molecular level. So, the fields of genetics and molecular biology have added strong support to Darwin's theory of natural selection. Comparisons of DNA and protein sequences can be used to show evolutionary relationships between different organisms. Now, the more related two organisms are, the more similar the sequences will be. Because there are thousands of genes in even simple organisms, DNA contains a huge amount of information on evolutionary history. So, down below, I have short DNA sequences for us to look at from a monkey, a hawk, a squirrel, and a frog. Now, based on these sequences, which species is most closely related to the monkey and why? Now, some particular genes are found in many organisms and give evidence of a very distinct common ancestor. So, examples of this can be found in humans and chimpanzees. Now, I've got a video linked here if you're interested in watching that, but if not, we are going to move on. Now, to be clear, evolution does not tell us that humans descended from monkeys or any other primate that's living today. It does tell us that we most likely shared a common ancestor with chimpanzees. So humans and chimpanzees evolved differently from that same ancestor. All apes and monkeys share a more distant relative which lived about 25 million years ago. All right, guys, that's it for today on our evidence of evolution. So be sure to tune back in for more